Hi, folks. This is andI. We're here for another Oracles of Colonization. We're going to be joined shortly by Lanae. We will both introduce ourselves. This one is going to be on the red path and the Wheel of Fortune or the mirror in the land back tarot in Oracles of Colonization. And I'm going to remember this time. Do like and subscribe, and that would be great. Feel free to leave comments also. All right. So I am going to get started with my introduction. Hi, and then Lanae will do their introduction, and we'll get going with this. So I'm Krista. I'm Lakota and Cajun from Standing Rock, and I was scooped at birth out to Eastern Ontario, and I currently live in Central Ontario in the Madawaska territories of the Algonquin, and I'm a guest in my daughter's homelands. Can you introduce yourself for everyone?
Yeah, I'm going to do this in our native language first, and then I'll do it in English. So I'm just trying to think, should I do a shorter version or a longer version? He uri no tūhoi Ngāti Pūkiko me Ngāti Awa hoki. I am Lanae. I am from the iwi or tribes of Tūhoi, Ngāti Pūkiko and Ngāti Awa. I'm currently living in Tūhoi land. Firstly, just mihi to Krista and her people and the whenua or the land that she's on.
Thank you. All right, so we were talking, and the card that you felt chosen to talk about is the red path. And I'm going to read what it says about the red path in the book for the Land Back Tarot. This is not the path that appears easy, but in the end, you will find it the surest path to take. This path has been proven through many cycles stretching back through time. Give thanks. And for my people, when we talk about the red path, we talk about being on a traditional path. And it's certainly not easy anymore under colonialism. There's a lot of barriers to a traditional path. There's a lot of obstacles to the knowledge and understandings of traditional paths. And there's a lot of ways that we are separated and prevented from getting to it. So do you want to talk to us about what that means for you?
Yeah, so I felt really pulled to choose the red path because firstly was the red part of it. My work that I do at the moment is researching Māori customary uses of kokowai. Kokowai is red ochre. So I was like, okay, that stands out. This is something that isn't heavily practiced anymore. It's not something that lots of my people, Māori people, know about. And so it is a traditional path. We're trying to reignite and revitalize this cultural practice. That's our goal. Yeah.
Nice. That's amazing. That's huge work to like bring back things that are lost. The medicine path that is traditional path for me, which is deer medicine, is one that has also heavily been lost, and it's taken a lot of effort to learn parts of it back. But you are doing this and like bringing it out for your community and stuff.
Yes, definitely. So there is a few artists that still use kokowai in their work, and I know a few people that use kokowai in ceremony. Not a lot though, and so even just over the weekend we had our young people with us from our tribe, and we taught them how to look for it, how to find it, and then how to make it into a paint. And yeah, we had quite a few people in tears on the day after, just thanking us, and that they can look at the tile or the environment in such a different way now. So that was, yeah, really beautiful. Yeah,
It is really beautiful.
mm.
How did you end up on a path that has been largely lost?
So my friend and Whanaunga, who's probably, yeah, so Whanaunga is a relation. We met about 2 or 3 years ago. One of my friends had just passed away, and my friend Sarah, who is an artist and has worked with clay and ceramics, I brought something off her, and then she gave me a gift as well. And the gift was this goddess or atua wahine, and I'll just show you. And this atua is Hine Ahuone. She was the female element and the first woman or person in our creation stories, and she was formed by kokoi. And so that was 2 or 3 years ago, and it was about a year ago that we actually started to delve into that mahi, so into that work. So yeah, that's how that started.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that have really surprised you about this, or places it's taking you that you didn't expect?
So our research collective is called Ko-Wairaro. So in our stories, there's the jawbones. Ko-Wairunga, which is the upper jawbone, represents celestial knowledge. Ko-Wairaro, it represents earthly knowledge. For me, I wasn't so surprised about how those two would connect, but we have had so much synchronicities, and those moments where you go, okay, this isn't just a coincidence that we've met this person, or it's not a coincidence that we've landed here, but also how much stronger our connection is to our tribes now and to our people. Yeah, that's been amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
I found for me that the more that I learned, there was the part of traditional past where you're doing a lot of learning, and for someone who was scooped out, for me, I had to return, to Indigenous communities, and so that learning felt really, really, really long, and but when I could get to a part where I could participate and share, it
Yes.
was really amazing, and I felt like it expanded my learning when I was at a point where I could share the things that I was knowing and understanding. And yeah, it is really special.
I
And
think you feel like you're contributing back to your people when you can share with them the things that you're learning. I think that's like one of our big things. Yeah.
And so much has been lost, for people's getting that knowledge back there is really important, right?
Yeah.
It's really healing. It is. Yeah. And I went through periods where I would get really frustrated. um I I wish we were more free with sharing within our own communities than we sometimes are.
Yeah, we actually, that's probably not a barrier yet, but the gatekeeping that comes with knowledge is quite big thing for Māori. It's quite normal that people won't share their knowledge, and we've been actually really lucky that people have with us. But yeah, it can be difficult.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a colonial adaptation to think
No,
that
it is.
this is knowledge that like you should gatekeep and decide who you're going to pass down to. We weren't like that.
No, we weren't like that, and I think that for us too, it's the patriarchal type things that have spilled down from colonialism.
Yeah.
So no, only men are allowed to hold this knowledge, or only men are allowed to share this with men, or there's a lot that goes on a lot with our people because of colonization.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely goes on. And then I just find the idea of hierarchy too,
Yes.
you know,
Yes. Yes.
that idea of hierarchy, that I'm special because I know something and I'm going to maintain my specialness by keeping that knowledge.
Yep, that goes on here too. Goes on a lot here too. I think, we're lucky that we've built a really good relationship with our people over the last few years. So I have a Pākehā mother, so a English mother, so she's white, and I have a Māori father. And so even though I live where my ancestors lived for the last 1,000 years, it still took me a while to connect with my people. And so I think there's that trust thing there, like, who is she? Who are they? Where do they come from? And being really strong in where I come from and knowing who I am before before people trust you, that you're not going to desecrate that knowledge that they're giving you. Yeah,
there's definitely a trust issue with those on the outside, and it's fair. I get it, but we do need to find better ways. I was lucky. I came back into community in my teens, and very early on, I was given advice by an elder, and he said to me, the best way to get reconnected and regain the knowledge that you've lost is to show up at meetings and socials and do the dishes and make friends, because
I love how that's so similar to us as well. It's like, grab a tea towel.
Do dishes and make friends, because people share with their friends.
Yeah, that's exactly the same here. Is showing up and contributing, and that contribution might look like doing the dishes, or might look like baking, or cleaning up at your marae. All those things. It's funny too, because with our mahi, we want it to be accessible for our people. So a lot of it we share on Instagram. The only thing that we get not gatekeeping, but that we get protective about, is not really being like, this is the exact spot that you're going to find this color or this clay or this red ochre. That's the only thing we don't do, just because it's a pretty big platform, and not everyone carries those, we call it tikana, or traditions, where you just take what you need. The internet is definitely somewhere we're really cautious of putting teachings out onto as well, because it is a huge platform, and there are culture vultures of all kinds of backgrounds. Definitely. Culture vultures. And in the weekend, we had posted something about what the work that we had done with our young people and our rangatahi, and some white person commented, can you translate those words into English, because I don't understand it. And so we're like, one, our native tongue was ripped from us, and we won't be translating for you, and this work isn't for you. This work is for our people.
It was a balance for me to make an Indigenous deck that put our worldview in it without putting our teachings in it. I wanted them there for our people to see them and find them as needed. But
and being able to use their own stories from their own nations and own people as well, and how they relate to those particular cards could be so different from the next nation, right?
They really can be, and like the red path is the tobacco plant, and while so many of us, I think all of us in the Americas, consider the tobacco plant a medicine plant, we have different tobacco plants, and some of them really aren't like what settlers think are tobacco plants. Some are.
Yep.
And you know, and slightly different teachings about how we came to them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think that's another thing of for us here, because of colonization, is how we ended up sort of seen as all the same. So we got given the word Māori, like we didn't identify as Māori before white people turned up here. We identified as our tribe or as our clan. So we relate to that as well. But our teachings are all different. We you almost say, before you share a story, you might say this is a Aotearoa tradition or Aotearoa story of this, because it could be so different to the neighboring tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in North America, there's something like 500 or 600 different nations, and but settlers still think we're all the same.
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah, giant continent of hundreds of nations, all exactly the same.
And I think too, like, comes to like where you're living as well. Like, there's coastal people and inland people, and you have deserts and stuff on your land, and so here coastal and inland traditions can be totally different because of the environment that they live in.
One of the fasts that young girls do when they become women is like, out here they'll like give up strawberries and all berries for like a year, but like where I'm from, you could not give up berries for a year. Like, that's how we preserved meat. But that same fast became like it was a 4-day fast. But like, because berries were how you preserve meat, like, and anyway, and it's done differently also, but like, you couldn't do like the Eastern Woodlands version of that fast on the plains. And it's thousands of miles away.
I always think too, is like our Maramataka. So Maramataka is our moon calendar, and that's how that was one part of how we did time, was by the moon. We lived really closely by the moon. And so coastal and inland traditions of what happens on a particular phase of the moon is so different, because coastal are relying obviously on the sea. So one thing that we've heard is, of course, being able to tell when it was a full tide, like by full moon. When it was 100% full moon was by the tide. But in Te Urewera or in Tūhoi, which is an inland tribe, they had a special tree, and they would make notches in it, and would use the gum. So when the gum was at a particular notch, that's when they knew it was full moon. It's like those traditions, and you wouldn't be able to do vice versa,
No, you wouldn't. How many moons are in your people's calendars?
Some go up to 28, some goes to 32.
Interesting.
So there's different, and each phase will have, so there's like the Tangaroa phases, which is about, Tangaroa is the god of the sea. So that's all about fishing and being productive and getting stuff done. And there's like, obviously the new moon, which is Whiro, and full moon, which is Rākau Nui. And so like some tribes will start on different, so some tribes might start on the new moon, and some tribes might start on the full moon.
We almost all start on the full moon out here. Almost all of us start on the full moon. I don't know any nations that start on the new moon. There might be a few. And then we have 13 full moons in a year.
I think we're the same too. Beautiful. It's quite a big thing that's happening now. It wasn't probably in the last like 5 years. Our people have started really getting into it, and like even putting it into schools. And our kōhanga reo, which is our language nest, which is like
Yeah.
for preschool children. And so what they'll do is things like on a full moon, they get the kids outside so they can get out all their energy. And on a new moon, they might just come inside and do quiet work. So they are using
lovely.
the moon. Yeah, so there's that relationship with the moon and how, and us as people, and how we relate to that and how we're feeling at that time. Yeah. And starting it really young, which is cool.
Yeah, that really makes like a difference too. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Just sort of becomes, well, it becomes natural, which for so many of us, like it's been ways we've had to relearn and understandings we've had to regrasp, you know.
And just having that concept of time being like a tool of colonization as well. Yeah, is like a big thing that gets talked about here, and how we should be able to take a break when we need it. So we have particular phases of the moon where you wouldn't do much, and then there was the other types of moons, where the other phases where you would be in high productivity, and you'd be out in the garden, or you'd be fishing, or and trying to bring that into this world now can be quite difficult.
It can be,
because we're living that 9 to 5 life, lots of us, where we go to work and we come home and we have those 2 days of rest a week, and then winter time everyone's still working, where our ancestors, that was the time to rest.
Ours too. It was time for storytelling, it was time for resting, it was time for beading and crafting and quilling.
Yes, all of that, and preparing yourself for the next summer.
You know what wasn't? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what it wasn't time for? We joke about this because our winter corresponds with, like, colonial Christmas, right? We're like, what we didn't do in the middle of winter? Drive across the country in snowstorms and blizzards.
That's so funny.
You gather in the summer.
Yeah, and accidents, and so our Christmas is in summer, and our New Year starts in summer, because coming not from a Māori perspective, but from a from a Pākehā New Zealander perspective, it starts in January, of course, and our New Year is called Matariki, and it's when a constellation in the sky rises, and that's when ours start, and that's in winter. Yeah. And it makes sense because everywhere else does that.
Ours starts in the spring. And I mean, it changes a little bit by nation, whether it's when the thunders return or if it's when the sap runs, but for us it's spring. Not the middle of winter.
Funny. It's but our work, we do lots of the work, and is around land, and so whenua for us, and it like brings up lots of those. We get pretty salty in some places we go to. So one place that my clan was at is this place called Ohope. Now Ohope is right on the beach, and so of course now all the rich people live by the beach, and we find lots of clay and kokowai around that area. And we will never have the money to go and live on our ancestral land unless something amazing happened. There's this, you go there and it's just surrounded by those big huge houses and white people, and it's like a white bubble in this place. So that's one thing that's come up lots for us, and we took our young people there in the weekend, and it was funny. We were just touching on the subject, we were just talking about it. We're like, it makes us quite sad not to have the access that our ancestors did to these places. And this American man came up to us, and he was like, "Whose car's parked in my driveway?" and started like yelling and like really, and we were like, excuse me, this is our land.
It
was just like classic how that just happened when we just started speaking about it. And we're
Yeah.
like, there's the perfect example of why it can be really hard to come back to these places for us. But look at us, we're here and we're on our land, and we're reviving this cultural practice with you guys, even though we're surrounded by a bunch of white rich people.
Oh yeah. We get pretty salty about it too. My favorite story of it, my friend and I, who is neighbor, are walking past like this dumpster, and we saw another native there, and they were like digging through it, and we're like, is it good stuff? And they're like, oh, it is. You should come check it out. So we checked it out, and we all got to talking and getting to know each other, and it was like full of like new clothes, and like, there was winter jackets, fall jackets, and so we were pulling out like the jackets and checking out what's in good shape. Some of them weren't, some were old. There was a lot of new ones, and we were pulling them out, and she's like, how much are you two looking for? When I was like, I just need one for me and my teenager. And my friend was like, I just need one for me. And she's like, cool. She's like, I want to take a bunch back to the shelter I'm staying at. And we're like, cool. So we're helping her sort through them after we found the ones we want. And this like old white lady comes out of the building, and she's like, you guys can't be in here. This is private property. You have no right to be on this land. And like, we all like are staring at her, and she's like yelling, but like backing up tiny bits. I was like, it's whose land? White lady, whose land is it?
Exactly.
And she's like, I pay fees here. I pay. And I was like, we don't care what you pay. It's our land.
Yeah.
You put your dumpster and your garbage on our land. We're going to take whatever the heck we want out of it. When we're done, maybe we'll come through your house. And she runs back in the building, and we're all laughing. But yeah, we get that too.
Yeah. You're just like, huh? No, you're on my land. My ancestors lived here. This is the place where my ancestors gathered from. Yeah, you're just like, nah.
Yeah,
it happens heaps. I'm surprised she didn't call the cops on you.
Well, she might have, but we didn't stay a whole lot longer. That certainly happened, but I used to get really pissy about it, and I'll be really arrogant about it. I'll be like smoking in a park. Someone's like, you can't smoke in a park. I'm like, if you don't like my tobacco, go back to Europe.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Sometimes it is a risk when you do stuff like that. You don't know if they're going to call the police. But I have found you have to if you embarrass them a little bit, and if you embarrass them a little bit, make them feel embarrassed of like their whiteness, like they are less likely, because they just want out of that feeling and that situation of all that being pointed out.
You do have to assert yourself in those situations, but then also of course being careful because of the Karen-ness of, I'm going to ring the police. And and that's a huge issue. I find it's best to make them feel embarrassed and racist as quickly as possible. I love it. That's so true.
Good tactic, folks.
I'm gonna take that on. I suppose that was one thing we talked about because of our COVID lockdown. We didn't have access to where we would normally harvest our kokowai, our red ochre from, or our clay from, and all those people, they live right next to the beach. They live right next to this beautiful harbour, and that's where we normally get our stuff from. And it was just like a big, like, in your face, like, you don't have access to this now because your land was taken from you and you're displaced. And like the whenua, the land that my marae is on, and where my hapu, my clan is now, is full of sawmill poison. And so even if there was clay there, or, you know, we can't use it because it's full of toxins. So it does bring up a lot of that. And we sort of make a joke about how we're taking land back by teaspoon, because we take, you know, tiny bits back, and it's like our joke. We're like, we take like an air carton out and we fill our little air carton with clay and kukawa, and we're like, yep, this is us taking our land back.
Have you seen that a meme? You might have seen it because we're both on some similar Facebook groups for Indigenous folks. Have you seen the meme where there's like a native guy with a bag of like gardening soil, and and they're like, I'm taking my land back one bag at a time?
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like for us. It's like our joke. It's funny too. We have like an offshoot of our research, and it's actually to do with we call it paru, which means dirty in our language, but we use dirty as in like more of a sexual way. So what we do is it's almost like Māori kink. We take like a lot of photography of people in nature and with clay all over them, and we made some G-strings that say horny for land back on them.
I love that.
Yeah, horny for land back, and we're sort of we touched on it in the weekend. So we had like a lot of I don't know about in Turtle Island, but here we actually had a lot of like kupapa iwi. So kupapa iwi were tribes that went with the crown, that sided with the crown, and they got gifted our land for helping them. And my partner
there's a certain nation here who's known for that. By our people. I don't think Europeans know, but yeah.
And
in the US, there's some tribes that not the whole tribes actually. The tribes in the Eastern Seaboard split into factions because some of them decided to be as white as possible and get involved in slavery. And you know, in other parts of their nations split from them because they weren't into that. In Canada, Native people were enslaved with Black people pretty equally. There weren't as many slaves because you couldn't grow a giant plantation in Canada like you could in the US. The land just wouldn't grow that much food, or not in that manner anyway. And so one of these tribes that sided with like white people sided with the crown entirely and like left anyway, when the American Revolution happened, they sided with the crown again, and and then came up into Canada, and the chief, who was like a half-breed Indian agent, and his sister, and they were like children of an Indian agent and a Native mom, brought their slaves up. And people don't understand, why were other Natives so opposed to these folks? Well, maybe because they brought their slaves up and these Native folks were enslaved.
Exactly. It was funny because we were talking about it, and my partner is from one of those kupapa iwi, and so his people got gifted our land after it was taken from us, and they're still there. And this is about a town about 20 minutes away. And so I was joking in the weekend because one of our elders said, you guys need to start buying the land back in Maratā. And we're all going, we're too poor to buy land. And I was like, it's all right, you just marry into it and then you take it. And so I was like laughing. I was like, see, I'm horny for land back. That's how you get it back.
I like this idea of you know, an Indigenous kink. It's something that's being revived up here too, because like we've lost it. We were sexually free people, you know, and you know, we didn't have marriages the way settlers have marriages. They certainly weren't, you know, monogamy was an option, but it was
same as
one
us.
of multiple options. You know, and then all these genders, It's like, you can't
Yes.
tell me that like we had multiple genders, multiple partners,
Mm.
no such thing as like, marriage, although we had like systems of how to end relationships so everyone was looked
Yeah,
after.
so did we. And it was like
Yeah.
you could one of the person's family might gift. So if the woman wanted to leave the marriage, her family might gift them a bunch of things, and that was how they dealt with it. Multiple partners. There's stories. There's songs. There was a song that a woman, one of our ancestors, wrote about her tara, which is her vagina, traveling around the country because she was sleeping with lots of men all around the country.
I
Those
love
types of
it.
stories. And yeah, and then there was like there's like things written by there's like songs and jokes about how white men were shitty to sleep with. They're really bad at sex when they came here. And then also, of course, our tākatapui, which is our LGBTQ sort of like word, and that we had relationships with same genders, or we were very fluid in our gender, and those things were lost because of colonization. And so we're sort of like trying to revive that for queer peeps and Māori people, and trying to empower them, like that they can be sexual. And we always talk about, like, I always think of how colonization and Christianity are like siblings, and they come together.
They are.
And it's really,
Actually, I mean, the history of Christianity is like, I mean, it wasn't called colonialism at the time, but it fits in. It's about empire, right? So Constantine decides he needs a monotheistic fringe religion that he can turn into his religion that will, control his empire. And it was a really effective tool.
it was.
Hugely effective, and it outlived, the Roman Empire, but it still needed empire. So, I mean, the backbone of Christians aren't gonna like this. Christianity wouldn't exist without empire in the first place, and it can't exist without it still. It relies on it too much. It's too systematic, too financially based. It couldn't survive without it. And so it absolutely is. And that repressive sexuality that it's so much about controlling people, controlling families.
This is like this is how your family should look. It should be mum, dad, children, woman or queer people aren't allowed to express their sexuality because that's not modest. But we weren't like that. Our ancestors weren't like that. They were so open about those things. And then also like menstruation, like we were very open about that. And birth was another one where men were very involved in the birthing process, and all those things because of Christianity. And because we have we have lots of Māori churches now.
There's some areas
like
where that's
on
an
our
issue.
marae, on our meeting houses, they do Christian prayers, but just in our language. And that's hard when you're trying to decolonize, and your elders are so involved in those things, in that religion. And I was like, funny because we did this presentation in the weekend, and I was like, oh my gosh, are they going to pull up our kink photos of us in front of all my elders? They didn't, and no one mentioned it, but I was like, no, I'm just going to take it on, and if I can, there's going to be a time when I'm going to have to talk about it, and it might be in front of my aunties and uncles, and knowing that it's okay. That's okay, and I'm allowed to express my sexuality, and my friends and my cousins and my relations are allowed to do that as well, however they like.
We need to bring it back. They've harmed us so hugely sexually all the way along. I don't think we
Yeah.
need to spell it out.
Yeah.
It's like, I understand and I feel for those of our siblings who really struggle with their sexuality. My
Mm-hmm.
medicine is very tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do a lot of talking with folks about it. And yeah,
That's
it's
beautiful. Yeah. It's
um
hard work, eh? Hard
it is
work.
hard. We have so much so many colonialism has impacted the way we relate in every single
Mm,
way. And
yes,
we have so much to heal from and figure out from that. Um, you know,
definitely. Definitely, yeah. It was funny too how it sort of came off our, it's not serious work with our kukawai. Well, I suppose it is. It's serious work, and we were sort of we were playing in clay down at this river, and we are really feeling ourselves that day. And we had been like talking about kink and BDSM and what we were into, and then all of a sudden we're like, should we just take photos of this? This is cool. We're like out in
yeah,
nature, we're out in the environment, and we're feeling hot and empowered, and let's show other people they can do that too. And so now my friend's been making whips out of like native trees and
that's
cuffs out of
awesome.
native trees and native plants. And yeah, and people were into it. People were so into it, and people were like thanking us, like, yeah, that they're starting to feel more comfortable and empowered in their sexuality, whatever that is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, our ideas are so messed up. There's those who will
yeah,
come back when, folks try and reclaim their sexuality and their body
mm,
positivity and be like,
yes,
you have to be modest. And,
yes,
we wore our dresses to the ground, and it was like,
yeah,
actually, we didn't.
mm,
When people
yeah,
think of like a Native woman from the Americas, they often think of like the plains dress with the long fringe and all of that,
mm,
right? I don't
yeah,
know if any, I don't know where, I don't have a picture. Anyhow, on my phone, I have such dresses. But like that dress for those of us on the plains, for my people, the Lakota people, developed in the 1800s. We actually, and we call it the three hide dress, but we had a
mm,
two hide dress and we
mm,
had a one hide dress. One hide dress is what we wore, and then the two hide dress like comes along as, you know there's early contact with white folks, and then the missionary residential school time for us was later. It was the 1880s, not just for where I was, because it took them a long time to get west.
yeah,
um and and then it becomes a three hide dress, and it's like, yeah, we didn't feel this need, and I'm also a regalia maker. So,
mm,
aside from like deer medicine, I do a lot of like craft work, a lot of artwork, like traditional, I used to bead, but I'm too old and my hands have arthritis. And I sew and make regalias and ribbon skirts and do stick and poke tattoos. So it's all wrapped up. My work's all wrapped up in symbols and art. So tarot, you know,
love that. Makes
it
sense.
was, yeah, but
Yeah,
and so I know a lot of the dress designs and stuff like that. And it's like, discovering certain nations had sleeves that removed off the dress in the summertime, and why certain styles of dress were cut a certain way because it made it easier for breastfeeding. And
oh, I
um,
love.
and all these things that get really lost and turned
Mm-hmm.
into this idea that like, you know, we were traditionally covered from head to toe, and it's like not until the 1800s, like late 1800s for my people,
Yeah,
like
that was the same with us. So like we have like welcoming ceremonies called pohiri, and women are told that they should be wearing like black and a skirt, and like a long skirt, especially if it's a funeral. You use your feet and your legs should be covered. But when you look back, no, we didn't wear black to funerals. That's a Christian thing. It came after like Queen Victoria or someone like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
We wore the kukowai, the ochre, and lots of our clothing is like cloaks, and those were made out of white plants, or they were dyed, and so they were colors of nature. And green is another one. We would wear plants on our heads, and this all comes from colonization. All those teachings that people think are traditional, actually not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, out here, in the residential schools, priests and nuns would tell parable-like stories that they thought would appeal to Native children and help them understand the Bible and Christianity. And those stories exist today. Is people think that they're Native stories. The most famous one is the good wolf and the bad wolf. It's like, no, we didn't have good and evil.
Sure.
We had a full circle. Like all
Mm-hmm.
parts of that circle are necessary and needed. Like,
yes,
we didn't actually believe you had good and evil inside of you fighting for winning. Like that's not our traditions. That actually came from the residential schools, and there's others like that too. Even like, people are going to hate me for this, the Seven Grandfathers teachings, that's the same idea. It's not actually, it's not, and there's areas they attempted that in. Like, that was harder to do the more out west you go, because colonization happened later. But it's way common out east here, because they've been colonized out here for like 600-400 years.
Wow.
So it's much longer.
We had ethnographers, I think that's how you say it, so people coming here and writing about our people, but they're coming from a white mind when they're seeing these things happen, and they're only talking to men. So a lot of the things they were only coming from men, and coming from sort of writing about it, how they saw it happening or how they heard it. And so lots of teachings have come from that, so that because they're in books and they're easy to access. Lots of stuff about menstruation, and they'd say they're dirty, and the women are dirty, and they'll pollute things. So they'll pollute the food if they're near it, or they'll pollute the space if they're in it. And it actually wasn't
there
like
the same things about us. And it's like, it's frustrating, because it is in books, and in Western society you go to books for your knowledge, you can go to the internet for knowledge. Folks, if you're disconnected from your communities, you are not going to find traditional knowledges in those places. One of my favorite authors has a hilarious story about that. So one of my favorite authors is Drew Hayden Taylor, and he's Anishinaabe from Curve Lake, and he tells a story in one of his first books that was published. He writes a story about how he remembered when he was young, and the anthropologists came to his community, because every community has them, and they were trying to get the stories, and the elders wouldn't tell the stories, and the parents wouldn't tell the stories, and they came to the kids, and so the kids were like, we'll tell you stories, we'll tell you tricks of stories, but you have to like give us money for it. So they get paid like $10-20 and have a heyday at like the candy store, and are filled up all on junk. And they understand why their parents and grandparents wouldn't tell those stories, so they made up trickster stories. They made them up. Drew Hayden Taylor grows up and goes to university, and in his Native Studies course gets presented with this book written by a white guy with like the made up stories him and his friends made up.
I loved it. That's hilarious. That's crack up. It's funny too, because some of our lots of our work we talk to kids about what do you guys do with clay? Because kids play in mud. Kids love mud, and they know what to do with it. And like, I crack up though that how that guy would have been like, oh, these children with these beautiful stories, and they're like, no, we're ripping you the fuck off. It's so great.
Yeah. I think about that story every time I run into like some white person who's like an Indigenous studies prof, or, you know, taking Native studies, and I have my PhD in Native studies. And I'm like, oh, 7 years, eh? They're like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's what my 7-year-old knows.
Right? And they
don't know shit.
Yeah. Culture vultures, like, you know, they're like the new agey ones that steal lots of teachings and being like, nope, that does not look right to me. You look like you got ripped off.
You know, I think I hate the white profs of Indigenous studies more even than the new age or culture vultures, because those white profs are also culture vultures. And
yes,
like they think they're so above. Like if you told them they were the same as those like new agers burning sage left, right, and center, they'd be like, no, you know. And they think they're all legit because they've, you know, gone out in their course and like, you know, been introduced to a couple old people who the university is going to call an elder, who will give away all their teachings to classes of white people. Like, I'm sure they're super traditional. Yep.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we have that happen here. And like you can like name the elders in your community that do that type of thing. You know, and they'll be like, oh, I met so and so the other weekend and they shared these stories with us. And like,
you hear that, you look around, you just want to puke.
Yeah. And you like laugh as well because you're like, half the shit they told you wasn't true.
Yeah. So and so, it's so beautiful. Yeah, there's one where I used to live, and she likes to talk about how her grandmother passed all her teachings down to her. And I was friends with her cousins who are like 15 and 20 years older than her. I was like, did she even know your guys' grandma? She's like, no. She's like, grandma died when she was like 4. She was just a baby. She's like, plus no one talked to that side of the family because no one could stand her father. It's like, okay, that's what I thought. Carry on.
So funny. And it's, but then it's like funny, but then it gets like quite sad.
It is
that they're like that, and that like this one person I know, I feel like he does that so he's accepted by white people.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, it's weird. I mean, it's like a insecurity.
Story. It is. And the sad part of that story is, one, she was too young to remember her grandma, but she was disconnected from her traditional family because her mom married some racist white guy, you know, and nobody wanted to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think that's like person I know too wasn't his teachings came when he was older and learned his language when he was older, and those insecurities that come with that, and trying to please white people, always trying to please white people and bridge that gap, but that's not how you do it. You don't give them our story.
No, they've been taking our stories for 600 years and it's not bridged any gaps.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What might help bridge gaps is if they went and found their own damn stories. Recover your stories.
And right? You know what? Like I talked to I sort of mentioned her at the start of this when I was talking to you, Nahuya Murphy, and she is someone that works with our atua, so our gods, and she's bringing back traditions around menstruation and all those things. And I had talked to her about this because I said, you know what? White people actually had their own beautiful traditions once upon a time, they actually they had teachings in their land. And she mentioned like Sheila Nagig.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why can't they just look fucking deeper than the Christianity on their side? Like, we have to do that. We have to look deep.
Yeah.
We have to go out and reconnect, and it's work. It's work, and it can be traumatic work. It can be hard, but we go in. So why can't they? Why can't they stop stealing our stuff and then profiting off it as well? That's the other thing, is profiting off our culture.
Yeah, same.
When they actually once upon a time had their own, before Christianity. Yeah, and you sort of get over it. And I only know like one white person, and it's not someone in my white family that is like the only good ally I know, that was almost like whāngai into our tribe, so almost like adopted into our tribe. And you know what, they sit there and they shut up and they don't over talk anyone, and they know when it's time for them to speak, or when they can contribute and when they can give back.
Yeah.
And we need more of those white people.
Yeah, we do. But I think, I can think of one I know too. And but they reach into their own understanding of spirituality and don't need my spirituality. They don't need to take something from me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So that makes it a more balanced and healthy relationship. Yeah, I think they need. Dan, I've said it to them before, find your own stories. Oh, they're too lost. It's like, no, like ours are also really lost, and we are finding ways to refine them. Like there's enough documented, and go find it. Go. Like, of course it's hard. Of course it's easier to just take from us because we already did the work. Go do the work.
Go do the work. And like they've still got structures there. Like look in England and Scotland and Ireland, they've still got their Stonehenge and their mounds, and go there. Go and do some fucking work. Stop taking the easy way out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. I'm just looking at the time. I'm just watching it. I've got to go pick up my baby soon.
All right. I need to get myself to sleep sometime soon also. So I'm gonna ask one or two last things. So with working with the red ochre, it's a lot of it is art, right?
It is.
Yes. And so is that bringing back a lot of talks about stories and symbols and beings too?
Yeah, it is. And I think it comes with art. So like the gods that relate to the ochre, the symbols of them, the color as well, and why the red or the brighter colors of the ochre were used. And so they would put that on things to deem it tapu or sacred.
Yeah,
that's something coming back. Or even on
red's
themselves.
sacred for us too. Red's sacred for us too. Yeah.
And it comes because, so the story with Hine Ahuone, who was the woman that was formed from Kokowai, the story goes that Tane Mahuta, so he is a male god, he was looking for the female elements so that they could reproduce. He went to his mum, who is our earth mother, Papa Tuanuku, he needed to find it, and so she gave him advice. He went to Kurawaka, where she lived, and the clay that he formed Hine Ahuone with was actually her menstrual blood, because it's regenerative. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's those stories coming back as well. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So every time, you're using this, you're actually saying this is the Earth Mother's menstrual blood. Yeah.
That is beautiful. Yeah. Our first story, of first woman, she made the first man out of out of menstrual blood, and his name would translate as blood clot boy.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And talking about how colonization changes it, you move east, the Anishinaabe have an almost identical story with all these translations of snot ball boy. And it's like, oh, that was absolutely the Christians. There's no way your people thought people came from snot.
So,
yeah.
I like the similarities because I think our, Indigenous people live so close to the land, and not actually close, they are part of the land.
Yeah.
And so that's why our story is always so similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are. And like the red being like that sacred color too. That's why I get it. I have it tattooed down here. So that's like the red path.
That's beautiful.
The name of this card, so
yeah. It's like all those secularities when you were talking about this stuff. It makes sense, and it definitely has brought both of us closer to that traditional path and building relationships with our land and our people. It's special, and we feel honored that we get to do that work.
Yeah. And even more honored when we get to pass it down.
Yes, that's our goal. Like after this weekend, I was like, when I reflected, I was okay at the time, but when I reflected, I got super emotional. I was like, that they get it, they got it. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be like, say to my kid, do you want to learn how to do this? And he'll say no. I'm like, oh.
I know. It'll get to like 25 and be like, oh, mum knows that. I wish I had listened.
Yeah. Because now I get Coco calling me up at land back stuff, being like, what? Yeah. How do I do this? And I'm like, yeah, okay, Coco. She's good. She just, she's starting to realize, and she was very involved. She didn't tell me no so much like a Hanu. She was often very involved, but she would be involved without necessarily paying attention. She didn't pay a lot of attention, and now she's at a stage where she's like, she realizes like she didn't pay attention to like the words and things that were important.
It's like Lambeck and this path are like so connected, and you, at the moment we've got this development going on, a housing development that's going to go on top of a ancestral cemetery. And how those two things link in, because we're working with land and they're taking our lands and our ancestors too, know. So like your daughter, is on that land back path and the activism path, but it's a traditional path as well. To defend the sacred.
We defended the things that impacted our lives. We defended the land, the animals, including the humans, and the water. Not because we were warriors, because you need to protect those things so life can continue. It's a sacred thing to do, and you make whatever sacrifices are necessary of yourself, when you're on that path, when you are taking that warrior path. They're doing good. One of the things I like that Skylar Williams, who's the orator for where she's doing land back at Six Nations, and she's actually working with her People's Nations like biggest enemies. What brings us together in the end, right? And he's always saying, we just want what every municipality here has had, to expand year after year, but instead you guys expand and we shrink year by year. You
Yeah.
know, more, and yet we have the fastest growing populations. Why is our land base shrinking?
Exactly. Exactly. It's my my clan, it was like super urbanized, not on, obviously not on purpose, but you know, our people were like in town,
Yeah.
and you just, yeah, like displaces you and disconnects you from the land when there's houses, and particularly really flash houses on top of it. And so the urupa, or the cemetery that they're going to build on top of, is going to be like a retirement village. None of our people would, most Māori people don't put their elders in retirement homes unless like they really have to. Also, I mean, those houses are going to be about probably 600,000 each.
Oh, God.
None of us can afford that. Yeah,
No.
and so fucking sucks. You know, yeah, it's all of
I
that.
hope you guys manage to stop it.
We will. It's not going to happen. It's really hard to see it happening. Like, you know, you can't actually visualize it. So I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Good.
Mm.
Thank you for talking to me about this card. And this was a really good conversation.
was good.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
thank
what's
you for
brought
having
you
me.
and attached you to this card. It feels so similar. It's art, stories, and the land.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I just felt it feels right. Our stories the same, our lands similar. Yeah, I love that.
It does.
Yeah.
And one of my daughters is from your people, but her grandfather was displaced. So on her dad's side, he's Roma and Maori. And then on my side, she's Lakota and Cajun. Her traditional name is Wani Winya, and it means 4 directions woman, because she came from all 4 directions.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Hopefully one day she can come home.
That
I
would
hope
be
so.
wonderful.
Yeah, I'll be here.
I will send her to you. Her
Yes.
grandfather was displaced as a child too, so he doesn't. Yeah, there's a lost connection too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Bring her home one day.
One day we'll find a way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay then.
All right.
So
Thank
good
you.
to
See you.
see ya.
Oh,
Oh.
see you later.